So I want to kick off our time together by sharing a very unhelpful quote about stress from motivational guru Tony Robbins. Tony said, 10 years from now, you'll laugh at whatever is stressing you out today. So why not laugh now? And to be honest, this is how I feel about that piece of advice. Why not laugh now about what's stressing you out? Yeah. That's exactly how I feel about it. And I don't know about you, but when I am in the throes of stress, whether it is from work, whether it is in my personal life, the last thing that I feel like doing is laughing. The truth is, burnout is no laughing matter. Stress and burnout are no laughing matter. Burnout is expensive, contributing to between 125 and 190 billion a year in US healthcare spending. Burnout leads to health issues like insomnia, depression, heart disease, and more. Burnout, no surprise, affects the quality of our work. In fact, a whopping 91% of those surveyed by Deloitte recently admitted that unmanageable work-related stress negatively impacts the quality of their work. 91%. As you can imagine, burnout affects turnover. One poll of HR leaders found that burnout causes somewhere between 1/5 and 1/2 of their turnover. If this is no surprise to you at all, burnout, turnover, put the word turnover in the chat box and let me know, because I saw this and we know that burnout is an issue, but it's amazing to see just how much it affects turnover in our organizations. I mean, there's no surprise that burned out workers are just more likely to quit. And the effects of burnout definitely go beyond the confines of work, impacting our relationships. In that Deloitte survey I mentioned, 83% of workers said that burnout from work spills into their personal lives, negatively impacting their relationships. 83%. So it's clear that burnout causes some big problems. But how big is the problem? Well, it turns out it's pretty big. 77% of people surveyed have experienced burnout in their current job. And that doesn't even count the times that they felt burnout in previous roles. Around 60% of tech workers have felt burned out. And by the way, whether you're in tech or whether you come to us today from another industry, I would love to know who's here today. Share your job title and your company in the chat and let us know who all is represented here today. And maybe if you're in the tech industry, this doesn't surprise you that around 60% of tech workers have felt burned out at some point. And millennials. Where are my millennials at? Those with birthdays from 1980 to 1995. 1980 to 1995. If you're a millennial, just let me know in the chat what the word millennial. It turns out that millennials are actually even more likely to feel burnout than others, with 84% of millennials reporting burnout. Yeah. So, okay, I've got a question for you. True or false? I'm going to put a statement on the screen on the next slide, and I want you to tell me in the chat if it's true or false for you. Here we go. This is the most stressful time of my career. True or false? This is the most stressful time of my career. True or false? Okay, so we've got some trues, we've got some false, we've got a mix, we've got a little bit all over the board. And John even says that it's true and false. So it's a little bit of both. 69% of employees in one survey that we reviewed stated that the last year of living through a pandemic, has been the most stressful time of their career. So today we're going to dive into 3 ways to beat burnout, to beat that feeling, to understand what's behind it. And, it really is no wonder that so many are saying that this is the most stressful time in their career. As a result of the new professional landscape, we're in more meetings than ever before. Our meetings are longer. We're having to be more intentional with our collaboration than ever before. And that doesn't even include those of us who've struggled with childcare or taken on additional responsibilities like caregiving for an elderly parent, virtual school for kids, or any number of other new variables that were introduced in the last year and a half. But what we take away from all of this is that chances are you or someone you know is suffering from burnout. Chances are you or someone you know is suffering from burnout. And truth be told, there's burnout in my history too. So I'm no stranger to high stress roles. So, in fact, I actually kicked off my career in the marble halls of Congress as a scheduler to a United States congressman, managing one of the most hectic calendars in the country, spending what felt like 10 to 12 hours a day, rearranging appointments on a calendar. That was the norm for me. And I fielded hundreds of meeting requests, speaking invitations, reception details, not to mention committee meetings and votes, the whole reason why they're there. But I missed my home state of Louisiana, so I moved back and began a decade-long career in the high-stakes world of crisis communications and government affairs. So we're talking oil spills, we're talking hurricanes, we're talking tornadoes, droughts, plant explosions, nonprofit embezzlement schemes, you name it. And I've probably escorted someone down a freight elevator and into a back alley to avoid the TV cameras waiting outside. As you can imagine, that 24/7 life began to take its toll. I was burned out. I've been there big time. So, like so many others who felt extreme burnout, I walked away in search of a better way of life. And after diving into every time management and productivity book under the sun, I became a time management coach, helping others create order out of chaos. And so now I help busy professionals just like you stop feeling overwhelmed and start spending your time on what matters as head of community at Clockwise. So consider me your time management coach. And today we'll work together to beat burnout. And we're going to do that in 3 ways. First, we're going to learn how to identify the signs of burnout. Then we'll talk about why listening to your team is such a critical part of the process. And then finally, we'll discuss why it's so important to tailor your approach. So we'll start by spotting the signs. Even though I'm sure that we're all on the same page about burnout, we haven't actually defined burnout yet. So let's do that now. Burnout, according to the World Health Organization, although it is not an actual medical condition, it's considered an occupational phenomenon. It's a syndrome conceptualized from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So it's characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's jobs, or feelings of negativity or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. In other words, burnout looks like having less energy, being less connected, and being less effective. Now, this could look different from person to person and position to position. This is where it's up to you as the manager or as the colleague to know your team and pay attention to the signs of burnout. For some, feeling burnout could look like being quiet and withdrawing. For others, it might look like increased absenteeism, not showing up. And then for others, it can begin to look like careless mistakes. Now, here's why it's so important to listen up when you begin to spot the signs of burnout on your team. The thing is that there's not a one-size-fits-all magic bullet for curing burnout. And that's because there are so many different causes of burnout. Research published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review found that workers are most likely to burn out when there's a mismatch in one of 6 key areas. Now, I'm going to share each one, and then I'll recap all 6 for you. So we'll start with workload. Long hours, not enough breaks, not enough relief, no one to delegate to, not a large enough team to pass on all the work. The next type is reward. Reward can look like going too long without getting a raise, not having any opportunities for advancement or recognition. Next is fairness. Fairness looks like discrimination, favoritism, being passed over and over again as you begin to recognize that someone is playing favorites. Next is control. So control is typically looks like the inability to set your own schedule, feeling that every move is scrutinized and monitored. It's accountability without power, and it's feeling like you have no influence or you have no say. Next is community. Community is that feeling like you just don't fit in. It's feeling isolated. It's feeling disrespected. It's just not feeling like you're a part of the team. And then finally, values. Values comes into play when you're working for clients that you don't align with, that don't align with your personal core values. It's performing meaningless tasks, feeling undervalued, and it's engaging in ethical conflicts between, what you believe is right versus what you're being asked to do. So like I said, here's that recap of those 6 different types of mismatches: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and value. And you can actually find a description of all of these and a quiz to narrow down the cause of burnout, whether it's your burnout or the burnout of those on your team, over at getclockwise.com /burnout kits. And I just popped that in the chat, but that one's hyperlinked for you. So you can actually grab our burnout prevention kit that includes a guide to these 6 types, these 6 key causes of burnout. And it also includes a quiz to really zero in on the cause of burnout. So now that we know that there are 6 causes of burnout, once you identify what type of burnout you or your members are struggling with, it makes sense that the best approach is a tailored approach. Solving the wrong problem, for example, hiring a motivational speaker to fire up your team when your team feels micromanaged or undervalued, that can only make the problem worse. So here are a few ideas for tackling each of the 6 main causes of burnout. Workload. First, whenever you're tackling workload and when you recognize that workload is a key issue among your team, this is your opportunity to align expectations, to ensure that your team is getting enough focus time, and potentially even to institute mandatory PTO, making sure that your team is actually taking the time to rest and recharge. One really great thing about Clockwise is that in our team analytics, you can see who on your team has the most available focus time at a glance. This can really give you those insights into, okay, who is really tied down in meetings and what does everyone's workload look like? And you can actually check out an entire blog post all about team analytics using the link that I just popped in the chat. So this can be really helpful in managing that workload piece of burnout. So next up is reward. If you find that your team is struggling because there's a mismatch when it comes to reward, this is your chance to look for opportunities to recognize their efforts and their achievements. You can give kudos or shout outs at your regular team meetings to make sure that your team members know that they are seen, that their contributions are valued, and also making sure that there really are opportunities for promotions, bonuses, or raises, and that those are are clearly communicated to your team. It would be so unfortunate to know that a member of your team is feeling that there's a mismatch when it comes to reward, simply because they don't realize that the opportunities are there. So this is a time when communication really is key. Communicating that people are valued, communicating that their efforts are recognized, and communicating what those opportunities are. So next up is fairness. If you find that members of your team or your colleagues are feeling a mismatch when it comes to fairness, this is when it's really important to make sure that there's transparency around who is recognized. We just talked about when there's a mismatch in terms of reward, people feel that they're not being recognized. Well, when it comes to fairness, this is when we want to make sure that there's transparency around why people are being selected for certain things, why people are being awarded. And one way that you can do that, one way that you can increase that transparency is by forming committees. And while I would never recommend that you form committees for the sake of committees or add additional work, whenever you have that committee, whenever you have a community of people who are working together to create programs to recognize others, there's more transparency and there's more understanding, and there are more perspectives at the table when those decisions are made, which helps create a much better environment of fairness. Control. If you find that members of your team or your colleagues are experiencing that friction when it comes to control, this is your opportunity to set goals collaboratively instead of a top-down goal setting process. Bring them into the process, make them feel like they're a part of the decision-making process. And then another method of providing more opportunities when it comes to control is allowing flexible hours. Now so many of us are working either 100% remote or hybrid or flexible, and having say over when they work and how they work can go so far to help create a much better fit in terms of control. And if you allow flexible hours, Clockwise actually makes it really easy to schedule across different availability and time zones when your team sets meeting hours and working hours. That's one thing that has actually been very helpful for our team as we're spread across so many different time zones and we're just in different phases and stages of life, is having those meeting hours set and those working hours set so that we're meeting people at their best. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about how to manage split working hours, I just popped a blog post in the chat for you that's all about those split working hours. And then community. When it comes to community, when it comes to there not being a fit, when someone is feeling that they are isolated, when they're feeling that they're not a part of the team, this is a really great opportunity to foster enjoyable social interactions, which can be quite a challenge now that so many of us are working remotely or are in a hybrid work environment. But one really cool way to create water cooler chat is by using different apps and tools. At Clockwise, we use this really fun tool called Donut. It's a Slack app that sets people up for just fun little coffee chats. And it really gives you the opportunity to get to know your team, even though you may never actually meet in real life. And then values. When it comes to values, if you spot that there is a values disconnect with your team that is causing some burnout, it's really important to find opportunities to reiterate the company values and to promote causes that are meaningful to the company. So this looks like making sure that the company is not only putting their values on the wall, but that they're living them. And when a company promotes causes and when a company lives the values rather than just displaying them, those values end up trickling down into all of the team members, and that's how people are able to know that there's a much better cultural fit for them, so that they feel more aligned with the company. And so any opportunity that you have to just reiterate your company values, at Clockwise, we actually read our values at the top of every weekly kickoff meeting, just to reinforce how important they are and infused into all that we do. There's no doubt that burnout happens. It is a fact of life. It's a part of it. But when you know how to spot the signs, when you listen to your team to understand the root cause, and when you tailor your approach, you're on your way to helping your team beat burnout. So I would love to open up the floor to your questions, whether they're about burnout or anything that we have discussed so far today, or if you have any burning questions about time management, productivity, or anything else that's on your mind. I will be keeping my eye on the chat, and I'm so ready to answer your questions. And while you are thinking about some different questions, I just want to reshare in the chat the link to the burnout prevention kit so that you can grab that, because it is super helpful and it really will help you take what we've talked about so far in this conversation to the next level, and it'll give you something that you can share with your team. Okay, really great question about John. Okay, from John. What about a situation where you have reports, but you have no control over their pay, promotion, or bonuses? Okay, that's a really great question. That's the position that so many of us do find ourselves in as managers or as team members who spot this as being an issue with that their colleagues are experiencing. So the first thing is that we're assuming that the issue is that there is a value, not value, that there is a reward, that the issue is reward, and that really is what they're feeling, that they are feeling burnout because they find that they are not being recognized, that they're putting in all of this work and they're just not seeing anything. What I would recommend is, first of all, what other opportunities could exist to give recognition to team members who deserve the recognition and who are feeling that burnout because they're not seeing that. Um, Sometimes there are so many other things that you can do or that you can offer someone that aren't pay, that aren't promotion, that aren't bonuses. And this could look like working with them to create a better environment for them, whether it's in the office or creating a better environment for them in their wherever they're working remotely. One of the things that I learned not too long ago from a negotiation coach that I heard speak was that so often there are opportunities to demonstrate a person's value to a company that aren't pay, promotion, or bonuses. And you could even do this in the form of maybe it's additional time off. Maybe it is working out flexible hours for them. Maybe it is giving them a title increase, just other changes that don't necessarily impact pay, promotion, or bonuses. But I think what I would try to do is find other opportunities to recognize people, whether that's just thanking them publicly for the work that they're doing, creating a shout out or a kudos agenda item in a weekly meeting, just so that there's a space for people to be recognized. And if they're doing a really amazing job, what are external awards that they could be submitted for? Maybe they have contributed in a really big way to a specific project, and there is an industry award that they can be nominated for. Even if they don't necessarily win the award, sometimes just being nominated is such a demonstration of their value to the company. So that would be one thing that I would recommend, is to look for other opportunities when you really have no control over that pay, promotion, or bonuses. But also, if you are their manager, what can you do about going to someone above you. And I know that that doesn't always work in every situation in every industry. For instance, when I actually used to work in state government, salaries were set. Salaries were, there was nothing that could be done about them, and because they were set by the civil service. And so, but when you do have the opportunity to go to that manager, to go to your manager, go to someone above you and really advocate on behalf of that person who really deserves it, that could be another strategy as well. So I hope that was helpful. I do know that's a really tough one. And so it can kind of take some creativity to find ways to, make sure that someone feels seen, someone feels appreciated, even when that control over pay, promotion, and bonuses isn't there. All right. Any other questions? Anything about year-end goal setting as we are heading toward the end of the year, personal productivity, anything about meetings? That's something that we've been talking about for the past 2 office hours. In our first office hours, we talked about how to be more efficient, effective, and engaging in meetings. And last week, we talked about how to spend less time in meetings. And so we've definitely had some great conversations surrounding meetings and time well spent. So yeah, if you guys have any more questions, and I'll hang out, I'll be here for the rest of the time that we have together if you have any questions. So yeah, thank you. Oh, okay. So here's a question that was submitted to me. So team members not being able to create time for their personal objectives besides team objectives. Okay, could you tell me a little bit more about that? So is the struggle that team members are feeling burned out because they're unable to work on their own projects versus team projects? I just want to make sure that I understand. So when people have projects that they own versus projects that they're collaborating on. Okay. So so that's yeah, okay, so that's a really great question. So I know that that can be a big struggle because that can be a little bit of a control. That's that control variable there where it feels like you don't have control of your time. All of your time is going toward the team's projects, those collaborative cross-functional projects versus the initiatives that you're in charge of. And so this is where I would highly recommend starting by taking stock of all of the different projects that you're a part of. And if maybe you're working in something like Asana or Trello or a project management tool that tracks all of these projects and all of the different parts of it, but sometimes it can be really helpful just to take out a pen and paper or a poster board on the wall and make a list of all of the current projects that you are a part of. And if it's your team member who's experiencing this, you can pass this on to your team member. But sometimes whenever you actually get a visual of each of the projects that you're currently working on, the projects that are in motion, you're able to see, okay, so I am currently collaborating on these 5 projects. And I am currently driving these projects that I am working on my own time. Okay, so the first thing that you've got is you've got visibility. You've got a much clearer understanding of the different projects that your time is going to. And so the next thing I would recommend from there, once you've got that visual of all of the different moving projects that you're a part of, is head to your calendar. Is head to your calendar and do a sweep of the past week or two to see where your time has been going. Now, I'm going to assume that you've got meetings on your calendar, and so you're able to take a look at where your time is going based on meetings. And so this then begins to give you that picture of, well, it seems that I'm spending, this amount of time on this project. I'm spending this amount of time on this project, and I haven't touched these projects in the last, 2 weeks. So the next thing that you would do is really begin to think through, how much time should I be giving to each of these projects that I'm a part of? Am I a major part of this collaborative project, or am I playing more of a minor role? And is the time that I'm currently spending on that project, does that really relate? Does that correlate to what I'm contributing to the project? Because one thing that can happen very often is that when we're working on with a team on a project, um, it can be very easy for us to move into reactive mode, right? It can be very easy for us to move into reactive mode. Someone asks us for approval, so we drop everything and we review a document and we give approval. Someone asks us for a status update on XYZ, and so we drop everything and we give them the status update on that piece of the project. And very quickly, what can happen is that a project that we're meant to play a contributing role to suddenly is taking up all of our time. In the last office hours, I told you a little bit about Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time allotted. And so when you don't set boundaries on your day, or when you don't set boundaries on different projects, they have the potential to creep into all the other areas of your day and of your week. And so it can feel like all of your time is going to these team projects versus your individual personal projects. So one thing that you can do to remedy this is to use time blocking, a combination of time blocking and your focus time using Clockwise. So time blocking is just what it sounds like. Time blocking is creating appointments or blocks on your calendar that represent the work that you need to do. And so if it's Monday morning and you're looking out across your week, and you can see where your meetings are located, and you can see where your focus time is located, we're going to start with those high priority projects. We're going to start by creating time blocks for those high priority projects. I like to call those boulders, those big, heavy, line in the sand activities that you do that are so, so important. But the thing is that they're often not urgent. And that's why we've got to put them in our calendar first, because when we create time blocks for those personal objectives, those high priority projects, we're holding space for them. You're creating that visual and you're saying this time is owned by this project. It makes you more likely to stick to it. And it also creates a boundary. You know, like I said, work expands to fill the time allotted. When you've got a time block, you've got that start time and you've got that end time to fit that work within. And so I would highly recommend, doing an assessment of those personal objectives and the team objectives. And at the beginning of your week, creating time blocks for those most important projects, and then going from there. I think that's going to be one way that you can help your team members create time for those personal objectives, is by encouraging them to time block time for those personal objectives so that the space is held for them. Because when we don't hold that space, it's going to get zapped by being reactive, by checking email, and by doing everything else, because work expands to fill the time allotted and it creeps into all the other little spaces. All right, I hope that was helpful. Okay, here's a question. How could we apply this on a personal level as well? Sometimes I feel more stress from my personal day-to-day stuff than from work-related stuff. Gosh, I know exactly how you feel. We've got so many responsibilities. We've got all of the responsibilities and things that we have to do in our roles as professionals. But many of us, all of us have personal lives, and many of us are parents. Many of us are, engaged in childcare or care for a parent. So often we just have so many different things that we're juggling. So if you're feeling like that you are feeling more stress from your personal day-to-day stuff than from your work-related stuff, this is what I would encourage you to do. Think about your work-related stuff. So yes, you might be feeling a little bit of stress about work-related stuff, but what's the difference? What is the big difference between the way that you're managing work stuff and the way that you're managing personal stuff? And so what I would encourage you to do is think about what's going right when it comes to work related stuff. Maybe things are going really well with work related stuff because you've got everything laid out in a project management system. You've got your work projects in Asana. You know your deadlines. You know who is assigned to what. You've got that bird's eye view of what your work projects are. And that gives you that peace of mind because you know what you've got going on. You know what your deadlines are. And everything lives somewhere else. And so I would ask you, how could you apply that to your personal life? How could you take some of that personal day-to-day stuff and take the best parts of what's going well at work and apply that to your personal life? So one tip that I would recommend, or one and that has worked for me as well, is when it comes to personal tasks, they're all going in my project management system as well. I would love to know, Edna, like tell me a little bit about where your personal day-to-day stuff lives, or, am I completely like not, am I totally missing it? Is this like not hitting the nail at all? But one thing that I would say is that you can take all of those personal things that are swimming around in your head, and could you put them in a system like Trello or like Asana in order to keep up with them? One of the reasons why we tend to feel so stressed is because we're trying to remember everything. We're trying to keep everything in our heads. And David Allen, who created the Getting Things Done system, said, our minds are for having ideas, not holding them. So any opportunity that you have to get things out of your head and either onto paper or on a system to create an external brain, that's going to relieve that pressure that you feel to keep everything going, to keep everything in your head. Yeah, yes, definitely try that. See what's going really well for work and see how you can apply that to life. If I could unhook my laptop and take you on a walk down my hallway. So I work remotely. I work from home in my home office. In my back hallway, I have, I'm a presenter. I love giving trainings, those giant Post-it note pads. So I have a giant Post-it note sticking on my back hallway that has a checklist of everything that I have to do in the evenings to make sure that I have a good morning. So I'm a mom of two. I've got a 3-year-old, an almost 3-year-old, and I've got a 9-month-old, and they both go to a daycare in our community every morning. I've got to bring the backpack. I've got to pack the bottles. I've got to make sure that everything is ready to go. And this is where I'm going to admit, I'm not a morning person. I am not a morning person. And so I literally have a checklist on a giant Post-it pad in our back hallway that says, take the bottles out of the backpack, put new bottles in the backpack, put the backpack by the back door. Every single Sunday, I have a checklist on the other half of the giant Post-it pad. That is my checklist for Sundays. Pick out the toddlers' outfits, pick out the babies' outfits, pick out, plan the meals for the week, do the grocery order. All of it lives in a checklist because it's one less thing that I don't have to think about. Any chance that I have to take it out of my head and put it in a checklist or automate it or delegate it, put it on autopilot, that's what I would recommend. So checklists can be your best friend. And, maybe you don't have to put yours on a giant Post-it note in your back hallway, but that's what's working for me right now. So, and that's it. It's really just figuring out what works for you and being willing to experiment. So any guidance, here's a question, any guidance on a situation where you have a people leader who may not realize that they promote a culture of burnout? Oh, wow. That is really good. So any guidance on a situation where you have a people leader who may not realize that they promote a culture of burnout? Okay, so This is a very interesting question, because this is something that really does come up over and over again in organizations. We would love to believe that. Oh, Edna, thank you so much for coming in. I'm so glad that that was helpful. Um, yeah. Okay. So this is something that happens all too often when there's someone who is in a leadership role who is a proponent of hustle culture, who is a proponent of, work the late hours, get here early, work late, don't take breaks, where it's looked down upon to take time off, all of those things that do burn out their team members. And so this is really tough, because the way that you approach it really is different based on the position that you're in within the company. If you're more of an entry level employee or a mid level employee, it may not be in anyone's best interest for you to go straight to that leader, right? You've got to be very careful about how you approach situations like this. Chances are you're not the only person who is recognizing this or is feeling this. So it's highly likely that others on your team are feeling the same way. And so whenever you begin to recognize that there is a people leader who is promoting a culture of burnout, I think it's really important that if you are a manager, that you have a dialogue with your team members, and that you lead by example, that you show up as a culture leader to your team, and that you take care of them, and that you look upward. What kind of conversation can you begin with your direct supervisor in order to begin addressing that you have concerns about a culture of burnout that is beginning to grow within the company? One thing that can be very helpful is to provide specific examples. If you can provide specific examples of how promoting a burnout culture is affecting your team and how it is showing up, bringing that to your supervisor can be helpful in the short term. It's one of those things where sometimes the person who is the leader of this culture of burnout has to have a major epiphany on their own, and that's not something that can really be orchestrated. They've got to realize they've got to turn the tide, or else they're heading to burnout themselves. And so what I would absolutely recommend is to make sure that there's a dialogue with your team members, and that you are being a leader, that you are being an example of the kind of culture that you would like to see, and that you begin that conversation with whoever is one level above you, just so that you're sharing, what's happening at your team level. Because again, chances are you're not the only one who sees this. And with enough conversations, and with enough, I think, pointing out and offering suggestions and offering solutions, you can begin to make a change. And it might feel like you're turning a cruise liner, that you're turning a ship, but a small change, a small turn in the right direction really can lead to that tipping point that will make all the difference. So I know that's tough, and I wish you the best. So, all right, I'm checking the chat. John says, I put start of day and end of day checklists as recurring items in my task manager. I love that. That's awesome. I've got that startup routine and that shutdown routine with those things that really help ease into the day and help you take your mindset from being in work brain to not work brain, and then really get ready to be present in your off hours, because that is so important. So we've got about, let's see, a little over 10 minutes left. I'm still here for questions, but I do want to cover some action items before we officially wrap up. And I would love for you to take your biggest takeaway from our time together. And hey, tweet it. Let me know what it was. Tweet it. Tag Clockwise, use the hashtag Clockwise office hours, and let us know what your biggest takeaway was. And then I encourage you to take action on one thing that you learned today. Even if that one thing is just downloading the burnout prevention kit so that you can do a deeper dive into burnout and share that with your team. I just encourage you to take at least one action from our time together today. And then the last action item is to register for the next Clockwise office hours. So the next Clockwise office hours will be on December 22nd at 11 Pacific. You can grab your seat at getclockwise.com/office hours. As you head out of Zoom, there's also, I believe, a link to do that as well. And next week, I'm going to be talking about personal productivity goals. So we've got KPIs, we've got OKRs, we've got team objectives, and we've got all the goals in the world and the targets to hit regarding our teams with our companies. But what about us? What about our personal productivity? So I'm going to be sharing 3 personal productivity goals that you should set for the new year. Goals that will make your days easier, that will make time management just a little bit simpler, and that can really help you and equip you as you are stepping into the new year with that fresh start feeling. So I would love to see you back here in 2 weeks on December 22nd to talk about 3 productivity goals that you should set for the new year. So with that, like I said, I'm here for questions. If you have anything about productivity or time management or burnout, like we talked about today. But if not, I really want to thank you for coming. As always, it is such a joy to spend time with you and to answer questions and to talk time management and to talk productivity. So thank you so much for coming. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.